Good afternoon, hello and welcome to the Tour de l'Avenir. Stage one of this under-23 race. It is the Tour of the Future. We have 8 days of racing, 9 stages over the next week or so, taking us from the northwest of France all the way to the southeast, from Morbihan to the Savoie. Today we started in Carnac and we're heading toward the small village of La Gissy, 142.2 kilometers. 28 teams have taken at the start today, all national squads save for one regional team, and that's the Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes team. And this really is an opportunity for us to glimpse the stars of the future. Many of the riders in this peloton already a part of World Tour setups, but this is an opportunity for them to shine. It is the Mini Tour de France, first established way back in 1961. This now is the 59th edition of the race, and the first edition of the race won by Guido Di Rosso of Italy. And there's the stats of today. A lovely day here in Brittany. Sun beating down on the backs of these riders, around 23 to 24 degrees, and a light tailwind pushing them pretty much all the way to the smaller finishing circuits that we have. And there you go, that is the gap on the group out in front. We have a group of 6 riders en tête. They've been away for a while, and right now they're enjoying a decent lead of around 3 to 4 minutes. France are represented, Luxembourg, Poland, Italy, Denmark, Ireland as well in the mix. And as you can see on the screen, a couple of the teams that have missed things are indeed starting to pursue, because this move is pretty dangerous, especially with the tailwind. Be interesting to see how organised the rest of the teams get, but it is Germany and Switzerland now chasing. And I'm Matt Stevens. I'm delighted to say that I have alongside me a man with deep expertise in the juniors and the under-23s, which is a welcome relief for me. It is indeed Jens Dekker, all the way from the Netherlands. Jens, thanks for joining me, mate. I'm looking forward to these next 8 days of racing. Should be a bit of a treat, and we've never had this race, the Tour de l'Avenir, from start to finish. We generally have had the last couple of stages, so it'll be lovely to get a deep insight into how this race unfolds.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. We see the breakaway for the first time fully on screen here, with the names lined up next to it, and it's a really strong break, 4 minutes. It's going to be an interesting one, because there's not a lot of teams controlling it in the peloton. So yeah, it's looking like an interesting race coming up.
No, it certainly is. As I said before, all of these riders represent their national teams. Many of you who would have watched the World Championships in Glasgow only just over a week ago will be familiar with this, but this is one of the only other times, bar for the European Championships, of course, that we see national teams. Back in the early 90s, in fact the mid-90s, I rode this event a couple of times. It was a strange mix of a couple of regional teams, national teams, but we also had pro teams in the mix as well. And that was when it was an under-25 race. It is now an under-23 event only. And the jerseys on offer mirror that, as you would expect, the Tour de France. The yellow jersey will be awarded at the end of today to the rider in the lead. Yellow jersey at the end of the race. The familiar green jersey for the points competition as well. Mountains jersey, polka dot, will be awarded at the end of the race. And interestingly, there is actually a white jersey for the best young rider. Given the fact we've got under 23s, that jersey will be awarded for the riders born either in 2003 or 2004. So a mirror image really of the Tour de France. And that is the reason this race was first established way back in 1961. It was an opportunity for the younger riders to actually show themselves on the roads of the Tour. The original race, in fact, was 2 weeks long, and they did the same finish towns as the Tour de France with a different start town, and that went on for about 6 or 7 years. And then it was in 1968 that the race, for logistical reasons, moved over to its own slot in September. And a bar from 1 or 2 years where we haven't had the race, and we've had it all the way through, and of course bar 2020 for reasons that we all know. So let's run through the riders in this breakaway. The French hopes are represented by Pierre Thierry. He's the man sat at the back. Very easy to recognise these national colours. Luxembourg are represented by Loic Bettenhoff. Poland is the man on the front there, just swinging off now. That's Michał Podmorski. The man from Italy in the blue, just sat behind the Dane now and rolling through. That's Giacomo Villa. We've got Anders Foldager of Denmark. He's the man on the front, pulling a really hard turn, and then rounding out the 6 riders in front. Again, very easily identifiable. The man in green, that is Dean Harvey of Ireland. And I tell you what, Jens, they are moving very, very quickly. And we talked about it briefly before we came on air. But I tell you what, this move with a gap of 3 minutes and 35 seconds, it's going to be hard to pull back.
Yeah, this is a very, very dangerous move. You see the German team is controlling. We saw a Swiss rider at the front of the peloton as well. But it doesn't look like there's much control. The gap close to 4 minutes, and it's been there for a while. That tailwind coming up, it's going to be difficult. And the names in that front group are some serious hitters as well. We've got Anders Foldager is a stage winner in the under-23 Giro. For instance, that's just a really good rider. Pierre Thierry has been on stellar form recently as well, taking a couple wins in the national and sort of top .2 races. So there's some really strong riders in that group, and it's going to be difficult to bring back on this terrain, especially with that tailwind.
Yep, the move went pretty early on. They actually moved through the only intermediate sprint of the day. That came at 45 k's in, and that was won by the Luxembourg rider Loic Bettendorf. Points there go towards the points classification. As far as I'm aware, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jens, but there's no bonifications at all in terms of time, because this race over the 8 days, as you would expect, is a mini Tour de France. We've got hilly days, we've got flat days, we've got mountain stages. On stage 3, we also have a team time trial. Fascinated to watch that one. And we do also have an individual time trial, which incidentally, a real throwback to the past. It comes on the penultimate day when we have stage 7A and 7B. That is something you do not see very much of nowadays, save for in the junior and the under-23 categories. But on the pro scene now, that's a pretty rare to see. So we do have something for everybody in this race. And it will also give us a real insight. Some of the stars on the roads already are signed to long-term contracts with World Tour teams. So a lot of these riders are already in the focus and in the line of vision of many pro team managers, but also coming towards the end of the season, Jens, it's fair to say this is a real opportunity for other riders who are just knocking on the door to really show themselves.
Yeah, I think most of the stage winners and definitely the GC winners we'll see this week are probably going to be signed already. But there are going to be riders maybe just under that, or who can take a surprise victory, who are definitely sort of going to be on the radar of many pro teams. And it's a great opportunity, especially for these younger riders, to show themselves in a race, especially since it's broadcast the entire way through now. That's going to be great for those riders as well.
No, it certainly is. First time it's happened. I've commentated on this race a couple of times when we've just had the last 2 stages. And just apologies for the little bit of picture breakup that we are experiencing. Cards on the table. This is a 4G transmission, so we are reliant on the local telecommunications master, of course, but so far so good. But if there is a little bit of picture breakup, apologies for that. But one thing's for sure, it is just great to have this important race that has been on the calendar for the best part of 60 years now, 59 years, or 59 editions we have had in the past. And when you go back through the riders that have won this, you can understand why it's so important. We had Sian Uthebroeksue, who took the win last year, ahead of a rider who is here again, winner of the Baby Giro, or the Giro Next Gen, as it's been renamed. I quite like that the new name, and Michael Hessmann. But if you look back down through the years, the likes of Nairo Quintana, David Gaudu, Egan Bernal, Tadej Pogacar, Bauke Mollema through the noughties. And then if you go back into the 1990s, we've got the likes of and the 80s, Laurent Fignon, Marc Madiot, Miguel Indurain, Greg LeMond, Pascal Seaman, and the list goes on. This really does give you an indication of how important this race is as a stepping stone for the riders of the future. And one thing that I think we should mention at the top of the show that is going to happen for the first time is we do have a women's women's Tour de l'Avenir, which starts on the 28th of August and runs through to the 1st of September. So the day after this race finishes, which is next Sunday, we'll have our first ever inaugural edition of the Tour de l'Avenir for women, which is another step in the right direction. Just shows the depth of the women's scene as well.
Yeah, it's a step in the right direction, and we hope, obviously, that it's going to be sort of a similar event to the men's. I think would be great for the development of the sport on the women's side as well, because there are some gaps there in that development pipeline. So this might be something that could fill that gap, and that's a great sign as well.
Yeah, it certainly is. Well, meanwhile, the gap has come down only slightly to 3 minutes and 20 seconds as they just passed through the feed zone. We're just going through a place called Siran. It's gently undulating day today, not particularly hilly. Gets a little bit lumpier as we head towards the finishing circuits. We do 4 laps. We finished the race on this third passage of the line in the small village of La Gacie. It's a commune in the Morbihan department of Brittany, only a very small place. And one thing that you will notice as we pass through this race, as it meanders its way through central France, from the northwest of France, through the centre and down into the Savoie region, is that we do visit smaller places, generally speaking. Carnac, where we start today, is a big coastal town, of course, well known to many people, but some of the villages and towns that we'll be finishing at may be unfamiliar. So it's another opportunity for France to showcase its beautiful countryside, to be perfectly honest with you, and slightly smaller locations, because the race is slightly smaller, well, considerably smaller logistically. You can actually fit this race in smaller places where the Tour de France or the Tour de France Femme couldn't ordinarily go, but it sits as part of that big family of races and is going to be an entertaining one. And I think, Jens, the reason I'm so looking forward to this is because I don't know what's going to happen. Not that I do in the Tour or any of the bigger races, but at least there's a sense of the riders that you think will dominate, a sense of the teams that can take hold of the race and shape the racing. But here, although there are 1 or 2 riders that we can identify as some of the favourites, the racing itself will be far more unpredictable.
Yeah, if you go to the Tour de France, you know that there might be maybe 5 or 6 riders, if you're very creative, who could potentially win the race. And in this case, I think, they're in that same category. There might be 10, maybe even 20 riders. We've got some idea of who the favorites might be, but there could always be interesting new riders coming up who've suddenly improved. That's definitely something that can happen in the under-23 category. So we've got some idea, but not really any idea who's going to control this race. I think we've got the main favorite with Johannes Staunemittet from Norway, but he's been sick as well, which he missed the World Championships with that illness. So we don't really know what kind of form he's in, and for the rest, there aren't really any really big favorites to look at. So it's going to be interesting to see who takes control. It looks like Germany's doing it, but whether that's for a sprint, for who's probably going to be their sprinter, Tim Thorn Teutenberg, or if it's to control the GC, we don't really know at this point.
Yep. Well, since we've come on air, the gap has come down a little bit more now, 3 minutes and 10 seconds. So they've, I'm not going to say they've totally got it under control, but they are slowly but surely eating into the lead of our 6 riders out in front. And everybody right now is working hard. Are you surprised that it's just 2 teams working behind them? I mean, when you look at the strength of the teams in this race, I mean, Belgium aren't doing any chasing, the likes of Australia. Great Britain haven't put anybody up the front. Great Britain have got a good team as well. The Netherlands. So there are a lot of teams right now leaning on the German and the Swiss combination. Any thoughts on why that might be the case?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think Germany clearly has a decent sprinter with Teutenberg. He's a fast finisher, track cyclist as well. But I'd say probably not even the biggest sprinter in this race. And Switzerland, I really struggle to identify someone who's going to do anything on this finish. So maybe they're even riding for Jan Kisten, their GC favorite, who could potentially do quite well on this finish as well. We don't know exactly what their plan is. But yeah, we're missing the likes of the US with Luke Lamperti, who's going to Soudal Quickstep next year. So he's making the step up. He's a really good sprinter. Probably the favorite for a sprint stage like this, and there's a couple other nations who've missed out on this breakaway who we'd really expect to try to control it. But at this point, 3 minutes, that's still under control. I think once we see that gap rising, maybe other teams will start to work, but for the moment, maybe Germany and Switzerland have things under control, so no one really needs to cooperate as well.
That's it. quite often the case, isn't it, when a couple of teams are riding, 2 or 3 teams, or even one team riding on the front, they're doing a good job, and the gap is starting to come down. That means everybody else can sit back, save their resources for the final. It's quite a tricky little circuit, quite technical. There's a really fast run into the Flamme Rouge, which we will get an opportunity to see. Good for us, of course, good for the peloton as well. We know how to pick their lines, and there's a little bit of a kick up to the line as well. So a nice little Kermesse-esque finishing circuit as the gap now goes down to 3 minutes and 10 seconds. And the man at the back, Dean Harvey, 20 years of age from Ireland, rides by day, as you can tell by the bike there, for Trinity Racing. He is a teammate of one of the fastest men in this field that was just mentioned. He was moving on to pastures new, Luca Lamperti. And again, and this is a difficult question, isn't it? I'm sure it isn't the case, not necessarily a difficult question, but one that's always slightly controversial. Like the World Championships, there has to be a real discipline imposed, don't there, by the team managers here, because a lot of these riders will have teammates on different squads. So do you think that sort of bleeds in sometimes to the thinking? Would you think the US will hold things back a little bit because they got Harvey in the front, or do you think that's completely consigned to the realm of an impossibility?
Yeah, we always talk about that kind of team dynamics, international team dynamics. It's complicated in the elites, and it's probably slightly less complicated in the under-23s. Of course, they're on commercial teams, but they're not making huge money yet, most of these riders. You know, there's a few riders on pro contracts, but most of them are just sort of, I wouldn't say amateurs, but they're not really professional riders yet. So the team interests aren't really that big. And also, there is a Nations Cup, which is the series that this race is part of. It's where the national teams under 23, they race together for about sort of 6-7 races a year, and so these riders are used to riding in their national teams and putting those team interests, the commercial team interests aside. So, you know, I don't think that's going to be a huge factor, but it's always, you know, the riders know each other if they're on the same team. So we've got, in the break, for instance, we've got Anders Foldager is on an Italian team, which happens to be the same team as Giacomo Villa, his breakaway companion. So that's always interesting to see whether they work together in that breakaway scenario, because that could happen. I don't think a team is not going to chase down a breakaway because a rider from a different nation is in that breakaway. But I think that if this comes down to a fight between those breakaway riders, that could really play into it, and we should keep an eye on those two riders.
Yeah, I do agree. It would be rather strange if we did see national teams backing off, and I don't think that would be allowed to happen. But you're quite right. Once the breakaways establish themselves, or situations on the road unfurl where you are riding against somebody from a different country, but they do happen to be a teammate, that's where these little alliances may start to form. Just simply, quite often, if you're in a break of 6, looks like you're going to stay away to the finish, there's just an agreement, well, I won't chase you, and immediately that increases your chances of a win, doesn't it? Something as simple as that, a little bit of those little bits of relationships can prove to be very handy from time to time. 55.9 Ks to go now. Now, this looks like we've got another squad moving to the front, and it looks like it's Australia. Well, actually, it looks like he's just moving to the front for a feed by the looks of it. So, my mistake there. Moving over to the right-hand side of the road, almost interfering actually with the chase briefly, as it now stabilises at 3 minutes and 10 seconds for our 6 riders out in front. Very effective fighting force here. Now, the longer this goes on, there's the speed in front, 54 to 49. That, of course, will depend on the way the road rises and falls. But it does look like we've got the Canadians now trying to get in the mix, or is that a bit of an attack? It certainly was a bit of a surge on the front as Canada now get in the mix.
Yeah, I don't think this is going to, or this is supposed to be an attack. I'd assume that Canada's just put someone up to the front and someone's let a gap behind. But yeah, the pace does seem to be on Canada, starting to control as well. I think the gap stabilized now. Just a few minutes ago we saw it drop a little bit, and it was because some of the riders in the breakaway took a feed bag, which is something you don't often see in the pro ranks as well. But just these team cars, they probably don't only have one team car, which is probably stuck behind the peloton, doesn't want to move up too much. So the rider's taking a feed bag. Usually you'd Well, that's interesting. Just interrupting that discussion, Jonas Stanemütted listed as an abandon, so that's the main favorite out of the race.
Well, there we go. The winner of a second place overall in this race last year, the winner of numerous races this year, including the biggest race aside from this one for the under-23s in stage racing terms, aside of course from the World Road Race Championships, the Baby Giro, or the Giro d'Italia Next Gen as it is now known. That is doesn't come as a massive surprise based on what you were just saying, but is a blow for the race, but certainly does open up the general classification, because I think, Jens, without dwelling too much on a rider that's now abandoned, he was, I think, the 5-star favourite, and the rest were like 4, 3 and 2, I think. So a big shame for the Norwegian squad, who are going to have to reconfigure and now look for other objectives within this race. But no, a big blow. Clearly just wanted to try and test his legs to see, but at this sort of level, at these sorts of speeds, there's no real hiding places there as he looks to the future, to step up to the World Tour team at Jumbo-Visma.
It's interesting to see that he even took the start. We don't exactly know what's going on, of course. There might be something else going on. But yeah, he won the stage in the Czech Tour before not starting the next day with an illness, and had to skip the World Championships. And now his hopes of winning Tour de l'Avenir are also shattered, it seems.
Well, that's the thing about the Tour de l'Avenir. He's got the rest of his future ahead of him. But try telling that to a young man who's wants to try and win this exceptionally prestigious race. Well, after those little flurries of moves off the front, it is still only Switzerland with one singular Canadian rider. And Canada have got an interesting team here. Quentin Cowan, Riley Pickrell, Mathis Julien, Philippe Jacob and Michael Leonard. Michael Leonard, of course, plies his trade by day for the Ineos Grenadiers and is an exceptional talent. A very slight figure, an exceptionally gifted climber, so watch out for him. And they're rounded out by Luc Valenti as well. So it is Canada that are now on the front. Again, Jens, from the Canadian team, do you think this is more worrying about the general classification, or do they have a sprinter that we should note amongst their number?
Yeah, I think their GC leader has to be Michael Leonard, but I don't think he's got the reputation to back up them chasing down this breakaway already for the GC. I think it's probably going to be about Riley Pickrell, who is probably going to be the sprinter. He's not the only fast man in that team, but he's definitely the one with the biggest reputation. He's also a 4th year under 23, which is something we should look at. Of course, it makes a pretty decent difference if you're 19 or if you're 22 in terms of experience, but also in terms of just development. So he's one of the older riders in this race. Has got a couple good results under his belt. For instance, in the Tour of Brittany in France this year, he got a couple stage podiums in sort of flat-ish stages, so he's someone to look at for Canada today.
Well, I'm going to be learning a lot, and I believe you will at home as well. I hope you're enjoying the early coverage. We will take you all through all of the week, all the way through to next Sunday, where the race finishes in the Savoie region. In the mountains, we do go up one brutally hard climb. We've done it before in the past, back in 2019, the Col de Loos, which of course we saw the Tour de France go up. Didn't finish at the top, descended back down and kicked up the other side, which saw of course the capitulation of Tadej Pogačar. A brutally hard climb, one of the hardest climbs in the Alps, it has to be said. But that's for the back end of the week. Another flattish stage tomorrow. Then we've got some hilly, punchy stages. And what interests me about this race as well is, and it's not just because we're looking at the under-23 riders here, who of course won't ride the same distances as the pros, is the fact we've got two particularly short and punchy mountain stages of only about 60 Ks, and I'm very much looking forward to those. I wouldn't imagine the riders are quite as much as me and you and the rest of the audience, but those should be thrilling.
Well, there will be a couple of riders who are really looking forward to those stages, but I think the majority of the peloton is going to fear them. These riders often don't get those huge mountain stages. There's a couple of races that do have them, but especially if you're just up from the junior ranks, you know, junior races tend not to have huge climbs, so yeah, it's going to be challenging for some riders. I think especially stage 7 is split up into 2 stages. I don't think we'll show the morning uphill time trial, but the second stage on that day, stage 7B, that's going to be a really interesting one, especially with all the riders already having a huge time trial in the legs.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough day. we hardly see it. I'm trying to think now any pro level events that have a split stage. There might be a one or two. I know in Australia and New Zealand they sometimes have those, but in the junior ranks and the under 23 ranks they are still quite popular. And I remember doing a race where we had actually 3 stages on one day back in the early 90s. I'm still suffering flashbacks and nightmares from that one, but thankfully I don't need to do that anymore. But no, we are going to be treated to some really intriguing racing as we pass through the centre of France. But today we start at the seaside, and next Sunday we'll be ending up in the mountains. But today it is destination Gassy, and this lumpy little finishing circuit. We actually hit the entrance to the finishing circuit with about 24 k's to go, and then we'll do half a lap before we hit the finish line for the first time. Then we'll commence 3 full laps of the circuit. But the gap is now starting to come down, 2 minutes and 40 seconds, despite the high speeds here, despite the fact we've only got 2 teams chasing, and maybe the Canadians have joined in as well. The gap is starting to come down now, Jens.
Yeah, it certainly is starting to come down, which is surprising because that group does seem to be going for it full gas, but the peloton behind, some riders really trying their hardest to close this gap, it seems. So yeah, there's no holding back at this level. They're just racing as fast as they can, it seems.
Yeah, this is flat out. I think it's again fair to say that the style of racing that you get in the junior ranks and the under 23 ranks is far more chaotic. But now look at the way that the pros at the elite level are racing. There's a similar new chaos that's ebbed into it, mirroring how these races often pan out. Far more difficult to predict, but in saying that, we don't get the opportunity to see many of them at all on our television screen. So this is great that we've got the whole race for us to view. But right now we are seeing a rather familiar holding pattern, a breakaway in front, all working well, proper team time trial formation. And as you can notice, Jens, they're not doing 2 lines here. 6 riders, sometimes that can be a little bit too brutal to get 2 lines going because you get very little opportunity to recover. So proper team time trial formation, maybe 20-30 seconds on the front, swing off and drop to the back. So they're working very well as a unit here, aren't they?
Yeah, I think it looks like they're just trying to get to the finish as fast as possible. Often you do see breakaways trying to hold back a little and then increase their speed towards the end. It doesn't seem like that's happening, and I don't think they can afford it, because looking at the peloton, we see the Dutch champion Pepijn Reindeling coming to the front, and also I think it's a British rider in second position there. So more teams starting to outride us to that chase, and yeah, I think that is not great news for the breakaway.
No, despite their best efforts. Harvey rolls through, and the man now on at the front from France. Looking good. The pole sat there just behind on his wheel. It's Pomorski, 20 years of age, rides for the HRE Mazowski Siacie Polski team, Conti team. Looks like a powerful rider, and it is indeed the familiar jerseys of Great Britain who are now joining in the mix. So the lead coming down, but with some fresher legs in the front. Actually, I think there's another team joining in the mix as well.
Yeah,
so
I think it's Luxembourg.
Yeah,
and Luxembourg is definitely not intent on chasing that breakaway because they've got a rider in there. So I think they're just trying to mess up the chase there, which is an interesting tactic. We don't often see that anymore. But again, chaotic racing, that's what they seem to be doing.
Yeah, it's Josh Goliker on the front at the moment. They've got a very good team. Great Britain, Lucas Nurika, watch out for him. Again, a rider for Trinity Racing, one of the most important feeder teams out there. One of only 2 continental teams in Great Britain, but year on year they produce some of the finest riders who go on to ride at World Tour level. Nurika is here, he's had a good season so far. Joseph Blackmore, Goliker is the rider they've chosen to hit the front, and one would imagine for the sprint they'll be looking after Max Walker, maybe Donaldson, but I think it will be a day for Max Walker today. And of course they've also got Jack Rootkin-Gray amongst their number. Applies his trade for St Piran, and has just come off the back of a quite magnificent 4th place in the under-23 World Road Race Championship. So a strong GB team who've had a lot of success in this race in the past few years as well.
It's interesting to see Goliker already at the front at this early stage. I think some of the people in sort of the under-23 scene were looking at him as a potential GC favorite, actually. But I think Nurulkar is probably the man to beat for that team. But it's interesting that they're not even attempting to, save Goliker for later on in this race. He's already being put to work for whoever their sprinter might be. But yeah, that gap is really coming down now with only 2 minutes and 20 seconds.
Yeah, 2:20. This group's still riding effectively. Still that team time trial formation. A shorter turn there by the Frenchman, Pierre Thierry. And that's another indication of how much this is starting to hurt. You can do a longer pull on the front, but if you can't sustain it, you soon swing off. There's the combination of the breakaway. Villa of Italy, Thierry of France, Foldega of Denmark, Harvey of Ireland, Bettendorf of Luxembourg, and Pomorski of Poland, the man with the red shorts. Just dropping through to the back now. It's a strong move. They enjoyed a lead of just approaching 4 minutes, only about 25 k's ago. In the first instance, it was Germany and Switzerland who were doing the vast majority of the chasing. And now it's just actually 2 riders now, from one from Germany and one from Great Britain, who are chasing behind as we head towards the circuit. Should only be about 15 or 20 k's before we pass through the finishing line for the first time, in fact, on this beautiful day here in Brittany. Wonderful racing roads. I used to love racing in Brittany. In fact, the first time I rode the Tour de l'Avenir, it just stayed in the northwest of France, didn't move down to the Alps. But now it starts and finishes. Always, the last few years, has finished in the Savoie region. Again, a good relationship with that particular region, who will put money into the race. But in the past, it's moved out all around France, but did for a few years just stay in one particular location. And because there's a smaller budget for this race as well, logistically that can be a lot easier. But good to see this one spread across France, especially given the route we had of the Tour de France this year, Jens, when it was didn't venture into the northeast of France or the centre of France much at all, really, just down in the south and in the southwest. But the l'Avenir just giving everybody a taste of these future stars, and I'm sure that must come into the thinking of the of ASO, the organiser of these races, when they're actually planning the 4 races that they have. Of course, the Tour de l'Avenir Femme now, the Tour de France Femme avec Zwift, and the Tour de France. I might be wrong, but I'm sure there's a little bit of thought into how they distribute these 4 races.
Yeah, probably a little bit. There's also, of course, that sometimes they've tested certain climbs or certain finishes in a smaller race and then moved to one of the tours. We saw that with Col de la Loze, which was used in, must have been either probably 2019 actually. It was used in the Tour de l'Avenir. With just a sort of, it wasn't even a time trial. It was just a 20k stage starting at the bottom. Which I think was won by Alexander Evans that year. And then, of course, the next year they famously used it in the Tour de France. Now we're back again this year for the Tour de l'Avenir as well, and in the Tour de France actually. So they've often they do the same thing in the Critérium de Dauphiné, of course, testing out finishes, seeing how they work in a slightly smaller race before they throw the really big race on that course. But now we're seeing the peloton sort of blocking out. It doesn't seem to be like there's anyone really chasing anymore.
Yeah, just spread across the road, lots of riders looking across at each other, and maybe some of the DSs have said, okay, we're not going to ride unless anybody else rides as well. Quite often when you get 1 or 2 other teams joining the mix, that can be the catalyst for other teams to join in. And often communication, though, at the pro level, I'm not too sure what the communication's like at this level amongst the riders in relation to road captains, but it is going to be slightly different. Although these riders will be relatively familiar riding the under-23 circuit, some of course riding several World Tour races this year, but the communication amongst the riders when it comes to making decisions and trying to communicate with other teams is something that maybe isn't quite as set in stone as it is in the pro peloton, and then maybe a little bit more brinkmanship takes place as a result.
Yeah, definitely, and there's also no communication back to the team car, so if they want to talk to the DS, they have to drop back all the way to the team car, so that makes it more complicated, similar to what we saw in the World Championships. But I think What we're seeing here, the peloton spread out across the road, it's just for that climb coming up. So we don't really have a kilometer marker in the top of our screen, but it does look like we're about 43 kilometers from the finish, because there is a climb starting now, just a 4th category climb. I think the riders just want to be in good position for that.
Indeed. We had one climb already today. That was the Côte de Cadoudal, and the next one is the Côte de Saint-Congar, 1.2 Ks at 5.6%, so not overly steep, just over a K long. There we are, right on cue. Here are the stats for this climb, a 4th category climb. 3, 2, 1 points on offer for 4th category climbs in the Tour de l'Avenir, and for the 3rd category climb that we had earlier on, 5, 3, 2 and 1. We've got all category 1st and 2nd, but they will come a little bit later in the week. 2:10 is the gap now for our 6 riders in front. And I think, as you quite rightly said, Jens, the shape of the bunch changing, just so some of the GC riders perhaps are just moving to the front, not so much to attack this race, just to make sure they're in a pretty decent position. And Australia now moving to the head of affairs, Belgium in the middle in that blue jersey, and also, you'll be glad to see, the Netherlands also in the mix there as well, Jens, just in the centre. And while we're looking at these jerseys and we're getting slowly used to the composition of these teams, who should we be looking out though from the Netherlands in this race?
Yeah, it's always difficult to name a specific name. I think Tijmen Gaat is their man for the GC, and all the other riders could go for stages, but we're seeing the sprint for the KOM jersey now with Loic Bettendorf and Pomorski, the Polish rider, going for it. It's interesting to see who's going to win that sprint.
Yeah, really big acceleration just over the top. It is the Polish in the slipstream. If we just move through to the top, we've only got a couple of cams. It looks as if it is going to be, I think it's going to be Bettendorf who maybe took that one from Pomorski. Difficult to say, but they have gone away as a result. Big gap has opened up. Such a significant gap that you wonder if there's the line. Not too sure who got that one. Your guess is as good as mine, but it certainly was close. It was the Pole who was in the slipstream of the man from Luxembourg, and we'll get confirmation from that as soon as we can. And that is the final categorised climb of today. Only a 3rd and 2nd cat climb today, and 1 intermediate sprint, as the group behind are on the lower slopes of the Côte de Saint-Congar. More of a long drag than a climb, and they went up that very quickly indeed. Actually caught me unawares there, Jens.
Yeah, I think it was probably Pomorski, the Pole, who took it in the end. He was a little bit in front of Bettendorf the last time we saw them, but they're back together in this group. Let's see how quickly the cooperation starts up again, because this is always a moment that could cause some confusion, with especially those 2 riders just doing a full-out sprint. They'll probably feel that on the legs, so they might not be too happy to work too hard right now.
Yeah, definitely. I was wondering whether they were going to continue with that effort, but I think the best chance, the only chance really, of this breakaway surviving to the finish, with the gap now at 2 minutes and 10 seconds. Another 10 seconds have been taken off as we see the United States of America also moving through to the front. One of my favourite national jerseys, the blue, or the red, white and blue vertical stripes. Greg LeMond, a former winner of this race back in the early 1980s, remember. And they do have a very solid team. Luc Lamperty, one of the finest sprinters in the under-23 ranks, and he'll be moving on to a couple of years contract with Soudal Quick-Step next year. Already snaffled up, but still all across the road here. But yeah, that little momentary attack to take the King of the Mountains point, I thought might split it. But to get to my point, Jens, their best chance of survival is to work as a unit right now, isn't it? They need those 6 legs to keep that pace as high as they can for as long as they can, and then start racing the back end of the circuit. But right now, this bunch seems to have a lot of momentum.
Yeah, I think they definitely need to work together to get as big of a gap as possible to get onto that circuit. And then it starts to get more technical, but the roads are just fairly wide. They're fairly straight as well. It's quite easy to control this race right now, so the peloton is going to aim to bring that gap down as much as possible before the twisty final circuit starts, because if they get on to that circuit with 2 minutes of a gap, then I think they do have a chance with all those corners that we'll see there.
Yeah, the circuit is around just over 7 kilometres long, and as Jens was just describing, or at least alluding to, it is pretty technical. The last kilometre is relatively straight. As they pass through the finish, there's a hard left, and then at least 7 or 8 pretty hard tight corners on this particular finishing circuit as we look at the lineup for the United States. Lampetit, Riccicello, Petit Saint-Romain. Riccicello, another interesting rider. Do watch out for him. Many of you will remember him. He rides for Israel Premier Tech. Had some good solid climbing results in the Giro d'Italia, and again that just shows you the difference. Although these riders are all under 23, we've got that separate classification for riders who are 19 years of age or just over, but there is, even in the under 23 ranks, and it's even wider than I think it was a few years ago, it's fair to say, there are some riders already that have got Grand Tours in their legs here. Now you could argue, is that fair? That's maybe a discussion for another day, but the fact is there are fully fledged World Tour pros in this field, and also riders who are essentially still amateurs, and everything in between here.
Yeah, Riccicello is the prime example in this field of someone who's already done the Giro d'Italia. He's a fully fledged professional rider. He's the only one who's done a Grand Tour, as far as I'm aware, in this field. So that, in some way, that must be an advantage, is the experience of such a long race with so many climbs in a professional environment. Whereas some of these riders are just on amateur teams coming to, and this is the biggest race they've ever done. So that's obviously a huge discrepancy. Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, you know, there are more riders who could technically start here. You think of the likes of Carlos Rodriguez, Juan Ayuso, even Arnaud Delis. They're all still under 23s. They could all start here, but they've chosen to ride their own World Tour schedules. And Riccicello is one of the only riders who has chosen to try to win this Tour de l'Avenir, and I think he has a pretty decent chance as well.
Yep, especially looking at the parcours towards the back end of this race. It does get, as we've described already, exceptionally mountainous. Some of the biggest climbs in the Alps that they will face, some of the hardest slopes, but that's a long way off yet. That's deep into next week as the pace just slows ever so slightly. United States in the centre, the squad of Kazakhstan also moving up as well. 27 national teams and one regional team make up this field. Many of these kits you'll of course be familiar with. I'll just go through the list of nations just before things hot up as we head to the front. Our 6 riders still moving pretty fluidly, pretty effectively together. Top left, 2 hours and 20 minutes of racing. It would be handy if we could have the distance to go perpetually on the screen, but there we go. That's the metric they've decided to go with here. But we've got Belgium, Australia, Austria, Canada, Spain, Denmark, the Czech Republic, Colombia, France, Great Britain, Germany, Ireland, Kazakhstan, Japan, Italy, Israel, Luxembourg, Mexico, the Netherlands, Norway, Switzerland, Slovenia, Portugal, Poland, the United States of America. Actually, I was wrong. We've got 26 teams and 2 other squads. We've got Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes, and then we've got the UCI WCC men's team, which is a team based out of Aigle, basically, that basically supports riders that don't have a lot of backing on their national squads. Travis Stedman is there from the South African team. Alberkim Fokus and Hamza Amari are there as well. And we've got a couple of Eritreans, Akilu Arifeni and Abid Aman. So that's a mixed team. They also have a squad in the World Cycling Championships as well, in the World Road Championships, which is just gives opportunities, and a very, very important team. And my admission from that was, I'm sorry for that, but it's a very important, worthy. It's difficult to name them in terms of what I think it's best to name it a special squad. I think it's probably the best to basically give opportunities for emerging talent with nations that don't have a lot of support, is the unwordy way to say it, I think, there, Jens.
Yeah, and we can, you know, go the long or the short way about this, but there are some pretty decent riders on that team. Maybe not the most known riders, but last year we saw, for instance, Vela Berhe, who is currently on the Green Edge team, the Jayco Alula team. So, and you know, proper World Tour rider at this point, and he was on that team last year and getting some good results. And I expect we might see some similar results from the riders this year.
They'll certainly get stuck in the mix, that is for sure. But meanwhile, the gap's holding steady now at 2 minutes as we head ever nearer the start of the finishing circuit. Just under 25 k's to go. They'll enter this 7-kilometre circuit. And the gap's holding steady at 2 minutes, but the shape of the peloton has changed behind. Not quite the same sense of urgency as we saw before, but since we've been on air, in the best part of 40 minutes, they have managed to slice a good 2 minutes, or just under 2 minutes, off this lead. So I would say it's advantage peloton at the moment. And I do agree with you, what you said earlier on, Jens, is that I think right now there's not so much a pacing strategy here, is there? As we look at the briefly, we're looking at the virtual lead on the road, that they are actually riding flat out here. It's not about holding anything back. I don't think they can afford to necessarily do ride too much of a nuanced pacing strategy on this course, because the bunch is moving pretty fast behind.
Yeah, normally you would say so. I do think they might have slowed down just a little bit, whether that's due to fatigue or due to a sort of pacing strategy. It's hard to say at this point. But I don't think these riders are all sort of at the same level. I think there are some riders in this group, maybe one or two, who really have something left, who are not pushing as hard as they maybe can. So it'll be interesting to see if those are actually there, or if I'm just imagining things. But I'm just seeing a couple of riders maybe not pedaling as hard as they can.
Yeah, just glass cranking, soft pedaling, just rolling through, but maybe, as you say, as soon as they get to the front, they swing off. That can be quite annoying in a breakaway sometimes, but it is a way to save just a little bit of energy. And the gap has gone out again here, 2 minutes and 10 seconds. Still moving very quickly. You get that real sense of pace, this side-on shot, the landscape whizzing by in the background. They're doing the best part of 45, 50 k's an hour here, probably even a little bit more actually at the moment, as they get the updated time check. 2 minutes and 10 seconds for our 6 riders out in front as we get ever nearer the town of Gassy. I'll give you a run through of the riders in the breakaway if you just happen to have joined us. We have Pierre Thierry of France. We have Loic Bettendorf of Luxembourg. He will be the rider who will get onto the podium later, and he'll be in polka dots tomorrow. He scored the most in the King of the Mountains classification, so he will be the first wearer of this in the 59th edition of the Tour de l'Avenir. Representing Poland and also in the move is Mikel Pomorski. In the mix too, in the blue of Italy, is Giacomo Villa. We've got Dean Harvey of Ireland, and rounding out our 6 men in front from Denmark is Anders Fuldegger, a very capable rider indeed. He's the man just on the front, just making way for Dean Harvey. And there's a good shot of Harvey. Elbows at arms at 90 degrees. Super aero. Now this is one thing. You talked about the lack of radios here, which I think is a massively important thing. Now, how will these riders be able to communicate? There's no other way apart from dropping back. So a lot of faith is given to these riders, isn't it, in terms of making sure they stick to a plan, which is very difficult because most plans get thrown out the window in a race because it's so chaotic. But this is where you really learn as a manager about your riders and their ability to make decisions while under pressure.
Yeah, I think it's for the DSs. It's definitely about, discussing multiple scenarios and giving the responsibility to just one or two riders who have to make the decisions on the road. Of course, in this peloton, we see a couple of nations who have to decide based on just the time gaps that they're given through the signs on the back of the motorbikes. They have to decide whether to chase, whether to sit back, and it looks like now some of the teams have decided to start, riding like professionals in their team formations, just all together, trying to stay at the front. And this, I think we're about 33 kilometers from the finish. We still don't have the kilometers up on the screen, but that's just based on the town we just rode through. I think it's about 33 kilometers to go. So it's probably time to get in team order towards that first passage through the finish line, which will come at, 21 kilometers to go, roughly?
Yeah, 21.2.
Yeah, so that's not too far away anymore. They'll turn onto the circuit a little bit earlier, so it's not too far away. And still 2 minutes. We'll see. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, it certainly is. 2:10, just over 2 minutes on this long straight road. We're basically heading in an easterly direction today. We're gently meanders through this beautiful countryside, and we stay entirely in the department of Morbihan. through the whole of the 142.2 Ks. But this appears to be the bunch they've ever so slightly knocked things off. Rather than one arrow ahead, we've got Germany to our left on their right. Then we've got the Netherlands in that light orange kit. And then just on the right-hand side, we've got Great Britain, who are now setting the tempo, looking for an extra little bit of resource. And they've added a little bit of spice to this pace here. And this is one thing where it's really interesting to see how the riders... Now, earlier on we saw the Canadian riders surging off the front, and quite often in the junior ranks and early ranks of the under-23s, riders are still getting to grips with technically how they ride. I mean, I know that riders are maturing a lot quicker now and are hitting the ground running. Certainly not fully formed, but very capable of mixing it with the World Tour pros. But from a technical perspective, these are the sorts of races where you really learn how to feather the power a little bit, just gradually build up the pace rather than splitting things. And that's always something that I find fascinating, is what we're looking at is riders with potentially big futures, but by no means the finished article. So many aspects of roadcraft still yet to be finessed. So it's wonderful to watch.
Yeah, it's one thing to have a big engine at a young age. You still need to know how to use it, and that's what most of these riders are still learning. Just looking at this group, I think, have we just lost a rider? Does seem that way.
I think we have. Yep, looks like we have. I think it is the rider. I think it's the Irishman's still there. The Italian is still in the mix as well. I think the Polish rider is still there. Foldegger is in second position. I think it's the Frenchman by the looks of things. It looks like it's Pierre Thierry who we have lost, unless he's just dropped back to the team car. The gap goes out now to 2 minutes and 25 seconds. And Great Britain again on the right. In the centre, we've got Denmark, one singular rider from Kazakhstan in that yellow and light blue kit. Still, it looks like the German squad on the right-hand side. So, yeah, not too sure what's happened to Thierry, but it could be that he might have just dropped back to the team car for that shot. He didn't appear to be looking in any type of distress, Jens, or he could have had a mechanical. That remains to be seen.
Yeah, no, that's one of the issues with this race, the 4G broadcast. We've only got two cameras on road, I think, so no camera behind the peloton either. And I'm just looking at this. I do think Pierre Thierry is still here, and it might be Dean Harvey who has dropped from this group. I think Thierry is at the front.
Oh, right, okay.
Certainly listed on the graphics. So,
sorry, I thought, again, I thought I saw Harvey, but that was my mistake. It is indeed. Thierry is still there. And right now, it is the young Irishman, rider for Trinity Racing, who is missing. And we are not too sure what happened, because his body language suggested, okay, he's going to be suffering. We're deep into the race now. Got around 30, or just over 30 kilometres to go approximately. Apologies for the lack of ticker on our screen. We've opted for the time elapsed instead. But we're not too sure what has happened to Dean Harvey. But as we head up another one of these small kickers, again, certainly not pan flat round here, just gently undulating. Very quiet roads, wonderful if you're ever out in this part of France. You will enjoy it. It's a real serene area. But one thing is for sure, it is pretty lumpy. As the gap continues to go out here, this is an interesting one here. We've finally got the top left 30 Ks to go. So that means we've only got around 5 Ks till we enter the circuit, and then a further 3.5 Ks till we pass through the finish line. 5 riders left in front, but that gap's gone up again. So it's back in the to advantage breakaway, although it's still in the balance here. This is by no means a done deal either way, is it at all?
No, it just looks like the riders in the peloton have stopped really chasing, and they're just controlling the peloton for the sprint. But whether that's the right choice with a strong breakaway still with 2.5 minutes out front, it's going to be interesting to see if that's the right choice. But the riders just in team formation in that peloton, looking like they're pretty sure they're going to catch this group. But you know, we've got this old rule of a minute per 10 kilometers. We're coming pretty close to that mark, just 5 kilometers to go until that point. So it's going to be interesting.
Yep, we are. 2:25 with 30 Ks to go is actually pretty much bang on that rule. That 25's 30 seconds for the other 10 Ks. So yeah, this is it. Finally in the balance. And of course, these riders will know exactly what the gap is. They won't hear it through the radio for reasons we've just explained. They've got the digital chalkboard to give them that sort of information. But again, quite often, the information they'll get on the chalkboard is not always correct. It can be old, depending on the way that they actually take the time here. If it's with transponders, it's accurate and updated all the time. But quite often, the motorbike just gives them certain points on the road. But it goes out again, heading north now towards nearly 3 minutes, 2 minutes and 40 seconds. Still Great Britain in the white on the right. And then the other white jersey on the left-hand side of your screen, it is Germany still doing the riding. Then we've got this vacuum in the centre, occupied by a couple of Belgians, and looks like the vast majority of the Dutch team. As this group out in front, now reduced to 5, continue to build their advances. This is looking good now.
Yeah, maybe they have actually held something back in the previous section, and they've just upped the pace. Of course, Harvey dropped from that group might be a sign of that. Just feeling the upping of the pace, that could be it. And it does look like they're motoring now 240 with less than 30 k's to go. I think the kilometers have just disappeared again. But yeah, that's it's going to be, you know, I think someone is going to have to chase at some point, but it's going to be up to, you know, who's going to decide that first, who's going to put someone at the front to chase full gas in the peloton, because currently they're just keeping their teams at the front, but they're not really chasing down this breakaway.
Exactly, and this is where information is key. This is where having a road captain who can make those decisions and stick by them. You cannot be wavering in your decision, even if you make a decision that ultimately turns out to be the wrong one. This is about the strength to make those decisions on the road. And right now, Jens, it's fair to say you're not going to want to send riders back to the team cars at this point in the race. It's going a little bit too quickly. The teams, there's some teams of 5, but the maximum riders that you can have in the Tour de l'Avenir is 6 riders. And if you want to try and bring this breakaway back, and you've got a GC rider to defend, potentially a sprinter to look after as well, and there is Harvey. We don't know exactly what happened to him. We didn't see him get dropped. He didn't look to be in any form of distress, but he is back in the peloton now with his Hella Mechanical. That's unfortunate for the man from Ireland, but Harvey is back in the fold, in the peloton, and we have 5 riders heading towards, thundering in fact, towards La Gacilly, the location of the finish of the opening stage of the Tour de l'Avenir. And the bunch moving quickly, but they're actually moving at around the same pace as that group in front, who continue to ride exceptionally well, aided by that little bit of a tailwind. And because they're moving so quickly, although the kilometers remain the same, there's actually less time on the road. The faster you are, the shorter time, the faster you go for a set distance, the shorter time you have to bring it back as well. And that's something that comes into play. And that's where this maturity, the relatively tender age of these riders will come in as well. It's the ability to think rationally about how to use the resource that you have at your disposal that's really crucial here, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely, and I think we just turned onto the finishing circuit, so 25 k's to go. This is actually the climb on the finishing circuit. It's not the climb to the finish line, because that is also slightly uphill, but this is the, yeah, it's not a very long climb, it's not a very steep climb, but it's going to be the climb that partially decides the ending of this race. The peloton's not quite there yet, but the break is on the final circuit.
It is, it's a long drag. It doesn't climb up particularly high. The lowest point they've actually joined it now, they're at 15 metres, so pretty much at sea level for the vast majority of the day today. It goes up to 68 metres, so essentially a long drag, as you can see. It's a slightly smaller lane as well, so we might see a little bit of activity from the group behind as they funnel right into this smaller lane. It's certainly not super narrow, but it's certainly narrower than the main road that they're currently riding on. But right now, under this dappled light, and the breakaway still working well together, it's the Italian Giacomo Villa who is on the front. Rides for the Biesi Carrera UCI Continental team. He's already won a UCI race this year. A very capable rider. And he's the man on the front. Here we go. We just see that movement now, Jens, can't we, for that right-hander that's coming up. That activity that we're so familiar with as they get to that pinch point.
Yeah, it's all the big teams who want to be at the front right now, turning onto this climb. It's crucial because it's very hard to move up on that technical finishing circuit. It's only 25 kilometers to go, so there's not a lot of time to move up if you are in bad position at this point.
Just coming towards this plateau, and again, not much opportunity to ride up the inside as well. That climb, there was basically a ditch either side. So you often see riders taking a bit of a gamble and taking the cyclocross route, but that climb doesn't offer up the opportunity for that, as we see now Switzerland on the left-hand side of our screen. Head-to-head, side-to-side, drag racing what looks like to be the entire Great Britain squad as we head into that corner. The breakaway of 5 already over the top of this long drag. Can hardly call it a climb. Over very quickly, and it is Great Britain who emerge in first place, but Switzerland not too far away. And the pace they're setting now, I think they might start to eat into the lead, because this is where they really do need to start chasing. And in fact, it's one of the riders from the Netherlands who goes on the offensive here, Jens.
Yeah, it does look like this is an actual attack. I think they were just pacing hard before, but this is an actual attack from one of the Dutch riders who rides for Jumbo-Visma, which means there are only a couple of possibilities. But there are actually, just looking at it, 3 riders from Jumbo-Visma on the Dutch squad. So we'll have to figure out who that is a bit later. But a couple of riders joining that. Looks like it might be Archie Ryan already trying to latch onto this move. So it's actually the favourites already for the GC who are attacking right now. Don't know how they're going to close 2 minutes and 40 seconds on that breakaway in the last 24 Ks in a small group, but it looks like the race is on.
Yeah, it does look like it's Archie Ryan. Of course, he rides for the Jumbo-Visma development team. He's moving on to EF Education Easy Post next season, so not staying with the Dutch team, but a man of real capacity and promise. The gap still holding steady at 2 minutes and 40 seconds. As you say, for a group this size to bring back 2 minutes and 40 seconds, I think it's going to be a difficult task. We're just looking at that big attack right at the bottom of the climb, carrying the momentum gained by the other riders, and has torn a little group clear. Well, it's actually quite a big group. It looks, Jens, to be about 10 or 12 riders as we shift back to the front of the race. And our 5 riders still en tête, still moving very quickly with only 23.4 Ks to go. And in a couple of Ks time, we'll get our first glance at what the finish straight is like.
Yeah, it looks like these riders are still on the descent, but this is actually, I think, where the final climb starts. Or final climb, it's not really a climb, but the final drag up to the finish, those last 500 meters at about 4%. So it's definitely not a flat finish. This is the breakaway, the early breakaway of the day, or rather what remains of it, because there's only 5 of the 6 riders left, and they're going on to the final circuit. Or rather, the first passage of the finish line, in fact.
Yeah, there we go. They pass through the finish line. It is the man that we're wearing the King of the Mountains jersey on the podium today, assuming that he finishes okay. And that is Loic Bettendorf of the Luxembourg. And the clock continues to tick. It has been the break of the day, and the peloton behind has fragmented. It looks like it's going to be knitted back together. Some real impetus here. But that little attack on the finishing circuit won't actually help the chances of the peloton getting back. It'll actually just break things up, because if there's big teams with riders willing to attack, although it's great for us as a spectator, as commentators, it actually breaks any coordination or agreement amongst the team to bring this back as a whole, doesn't it? And also suggests that the Dutch might not have a sprinter to look after as well, unless I'm wrong here.
No, the Dutch definitely don't have one of the top sprinters. I think they've got a couple of riders who could do well on a finish like this, but probably no one is going to win against the out-and-out sprinters. So they've decided to adopt an aggressive strategy, but yeah, they still have to catch that breakaway if they want to win the stage. So that's still going to be a problem for them. The pace does seem to be on right now, but this, I think, is still the riders who they think they're still on an attack, and now the realization has come that the peloton's back on their wheel, and we'll have to see who's going to take it up now. But the pace might stall a little bit now.
Well, they've still got this finishing straight to come up. It's been a couple of minutes, or just shy of 2 minutes, since our group of 5 moved clear. What a great shot that is of the peloton behind. It is Great Britain and the United States of America. They've just, well, there we go. It's 1 minute and 36 seconds. If that is correct, they've shaved a lot off that lead. This is looking a little bit more likely that the break may be caught. That stinging acceleration on the climb. A couple of little gaps here showing that there's some pretty tired legs already on this opening stage of the Tour de l'Avenir. The crowd applauding the riders as they roll through the finishing line. It's certainly not a big climb, but it is a nasty little drag to the line. A couple of riders here really starting to struggle, been jettisoned out of the rear of this peloton of 161 riders. 28 teams represented, and it looks as if the racing here, Jens, is really on now.
Yeah, and in fact, I think this might be Luke Lamperti. I think he's the only rider for Trinity on the US squad, so I think he's on the attack, which is a surprise because he's actually the main sprinter in this field. So interesting move from Luke Lamperti and the American team. Maybe he doesn't feel like he's got the team to chase this down and he's going to do it himself.
Certainly could be the case with only 20 Ks to go. Meanwhile, up in front, they'll know that the lead has started to crumble. But what they will know behind is that there is a real lack of cohesion. Well, in fact, they won't know that. All they can see is the time gap. They won't be getting information from the radio just to inform them of how things are going behind. But this little splinter group going off the front, it does look like it is indeed Lamperti. He's been running a Specialized bike, and notice the big S on his head tube. So Lamperti on the front. He's got a rider from Great Britain with him. As soon as we can recognise him, I'll let you know. But we're just coming to the 20 kilometres to go point, and this little duo have opened up a decent lead.
Yeah, it's a good lead, but it's going to be difficult to close that gap with just the two of them. It's actually Max Walker who's made it into this group. But two riders against a group of 5 riders. You know, the 5 riders obviously tired from the whole day's racing, but you know, it's just 2 riders. It's going to be very difficult to close that down if no one else comes across to the two of them.
Well, it is indeed Max Walker and Luke Lamperti, both teammates at Trinity Racing. Max Walker fresh off the back of a 9th place finish at the Under-23 World Road Race Championships. As we look once more at the competition of our group out in front, Villa, Thierry, Voldegger, Bettendorf and Villa. That is the group out in front, 5 strong. And they've got a lead of about 1.5 minutes with just under 20 kilometres to go. And the group trying to get across, although it's a big ask, Max Walker and Luke Lamperti, both of the same continental team, but both riding for their respective nations. And that was interesting. Lamperti not willing to work with Walker unless he's actually starting to suffer. And that quite often happens. Might just need that little bit of an opportunity to rest up. But most of Lamperti's wins, actually, I think looking back at all of Lamperti's wins, have all come from group finishes, haven't they?
Yeah, he is a sprinter for mostly. You know, he's not known for his time trialing ability. He's not known for his climbing. He's mostly a sprinter. That's why he's gone to that Soudal Quickstep team for next year. So it's a very interesting move to see him on the attack, which indicates that either he's not confident in his sprint, which I really doubt, or he's just decided that this is not the way to win the race and he has to attack somehow.
Exactly, perhaps thinking, well, there's not enough cohesion behind, the gap isn't coming down quick enough, and there it is, 1 minute and 45 seconds it says. Still a pretty decent lead at this sort of speed, well over 1 kilometre in terms of gap on the road. We're on to that little climb that they've already ascended on 1 occasion, and next time through the finishing line there'll be 2 laps to go. And meanwhile, the chasing group of Luke Lamperti of the United States of America, and of course his erstwhile teammate Max Walker. They haven't got too much of a lead over the group behind. There does seem to be a little bit of cohesion. In fact, it's saying it's only 15 seconds. That certainly looks about right. So an interesting little move here. I think that does tell us a lot, though, doesn't it? That they've decided to attack, especially the fact that we saw Great Britain riding as a unit, and now not convinced perhaps that this gap is going to come down in time, and the best way to get a look in here is to try and get across the gap. But for just 2 riders against 5, that's going to be a big order.
Yeah, I don't think those 2 are going to make it across. I think someone has to come up and join them, and maybe if they get a group of 5 or 6 riders together, they could come across, because obviously they do have the fresher legs compared to these 5 riders who've been out in the front all day. But I think this next climb is going to be telling whether we see someone jump across here, or a completely new group form from inside the peloton, or whether someone brings control back to the peloton and starts to chase this down. That's sort of the options that I see. But yeah, it's we'll see. At this point, the breakaway still has a pretty decent gap. Just 1:45 with 20, well, less than 20 k's to go, just 17 kilometers to go. That's they've got a chance. It's going to be difficult, but they definitely have a chance.
Yep, I do think they've got more of a chance than they did when it was just 2 minutes with about 30 k's to go, or 2.5 minutes. And the gap has come down considerably, but they're still working as a unit. But it does look like there's some suffering going on, without a shadow of a doubt. Just the body language of the man on the back here, Loic Bettendorf. He's certainly got the compensation of taking a step onto the podium later on. He is confirmed as the leader of the King of the Mountains. But meanwhile, this little group behind, Luc Lamberty, sat on the wheel of Max Walker. In fact, when you look at the composition of the GB team, Max Walker would be the rider that they would want to go for the sprint as well, perhaps. And there was a simultaneous glance, almost like a synchronized look behind them to see the gap they've got, and they are opening up that lead. So this is a good little move here by Lamberty and Walker. But I do agree with you, with only just over 10 miles to go, 16.7 Ks to go, that's a lot of ground to make up.
Yeah, and definitely, because it's not the two of them, it's actually just Max Walker working at this point.
Yeah.
Lamberty is sat on the wheel, and whether he's leaning on his trade teammate or whether he's just made the tactical decision of sitting on the wheel, somehow Max Walker has decided to keep going with the best sprinter in the field in his wheel, which is a fairly curious decision. I think he probably is hoping for a couple other riders to join him in this group.
Yep. There's still a lot of big teams, a lot of relatively fresh legs in the peloton behind. But they've opened up a decent gap. Just shows how well Max Walker is going. It looks like there's one solitary rider trying to catapult themselves across that void as we head back to the front. The man on the front is Pierre Thierry of France. He's riding on home soil. Normally he rides for the Morbihan Faibolia team, should I say. So these are local roads for him. He's had a one UCI win this season. He's just dropping into the back there, so this would be an amazing victory were he to pull it off. A rider on home soil, I think that would have been part of the motivation, one would imagine, for him to get into the move. You always get riders who live locally trying to get into the move, but there's a realistic chance now as they pass through the finish in just a few moments' time with 2 laps to go, Jens, that this group could stay away.
Yeah, there's 5 strong riders, and they've got a gap of 1:45 with just 15 kilometers to go. That is, yeah, there's a realistic chance that some of them will stay away, probably not the entire group, but someone from this group could win this stage, and that would already be an upset in what was really termed to be a sprinter stage for, well, ahead of this race. Yeah.
Well, here's the little satellite group that are in between. I wouldn't exactly say that it's a Chasse Patate group, because they are making inroads. Still Max Walker on the front. Every time that we've seen this duo, it has only been the British rider who's been making the pace behind. Quite often there's an agreement that, okay, I'll ride on the flatter sections, sorry, on the climbs and the flat, just give me a little bit of opportunity to rest on the descents. But it doesn't seem to be the case. Lamberty is just sat directly in the slipstream of Max Walker. And I can just see the bunch, they're not too far behind at all. And they look like they're about 15 or 20 seconds. Here is the gap to this group now. Max Walker leads them through. It's going to be just over a minute. And if that gap is correct, they've actually taken another 15 seconds or so. So the gap now is 1:05 to the 2 chasers, with still 2 laps to go this circuit. And there, Jens, is the group behind, still full of fight. And it looks like it is the team of Denmark. Well, they're actually blocking it. So Switzerland doing the chasing, and Denmark, because they've got Foldager out in front, just trying to shut things down, neutralise any moves there.
Yeah, there is some fight in the group, but there's no real control. There's no teams on the front. There's just individuals attacking, which is not what you want to see if you want to see this group coming back. I think this is great news for the breakaway, because if there's no control, there's a pretty decent chance that they're going to stay away.
It certainly does look like that. Still another 2 complete circuits, and they are moving very, very quickly indeed. They've been up that drag. They're now dropping down, losing a little bit of elevation, adding to the ability to set that quick tempo. Longer turns on the front, just trying to see the riders that are suffering. It looked as if it was Bettendorf who was suffering a little bit earlier on, but now we're seeing Lamberty go to the front now. Quite often, if you have jumped into a small move and you put yourself into the red, which of course Jens invariably happens, it can take quite a while to recover to the point where you can actually contribute, especially when there's only 2 of you out in front.
Yeah, it could be that. It could also be that they've just passed through the finish line, where of course all the seniors are waiting for the finish. So there might be, well, there is an opportunity for some communication there, but something's just happened and Max Walker is on his own. It's interesting to see that Lampert, he just sort of dropped back. I don't know if that's just a decision of waiting for the peloton, because it is closing in a bit. But yeah, it's curious moves again.
Yeah, definitely a curious one. Max Walker out in front on his own. Well, he's in between, of course. It's saying the gap is 120. The check that we saw was around 1 minute and 5 seconds, and there is the bunch behind. And as Jens just said, no real organisation at all as they went through the finishing line. A couple of the teammates of riders out in front, in particular Denmark, blocking well. And you can just see, or we just saw a few moments ago, the bunch certainly not intact. There's a little group of about 6 riders that's now starting to move clear and shutting down the gap on Max Walker. And I think that was that decision. I don't think Lamperty was dropped there, Jens. I think it was just a call he made. Look, this isn't going anywhere. We've still got the best part of 12, 13 Ks to go. If I'm going to have any chance of winning this bike race, it's not going to be from a break of 2. It's being in the bunch.
Yeah, well, the funny thing is that he sat on for the best part of a lap and then just decided to do one small turn and then drop back. It's a weird chain of decisions, really, but I think it's probably for the best that he's dropped back to the peloton and he's going to try to sprint, but he still, of course, has to become a sprint because it's by no means certain with this group out ahead.
Yeah, that certainly is the case. Max Walker, very stylish rider on a bike from Trinity Racing. Buoyed by that top 10 success. In fact, we had 2 riders, or Great Britain, should I say, 2 riders inside the top 10. Jack Rudkin-Gray, another member of the Great Britain team that is here, finished just outside of the medals. And the gap now is 105. It's saying 105 for the peloton, but I do think it actually is to Max Walker. But he only has a lead of approximately 10 or 15 seconds over the bunch behind. But despite that, he's continuing with his effort. He's committed, though, isn't he? There's no point in him really sitting up here, because from what we've learned about the way the peloton is moving, about the distinct lack of any cohesion, it might actually be the right call. It's a bit of a gamble, but we could see a group actually come across to Walker here, couldn't we? But increasingly, the chances of bridging across himself are not exactly remote, but it's going to take a big push now to shut down 1 minute and 10 seconds in just 11.5 Ks.
Yeah, I still think he has to commit to this move. Of course, he's got a team behind with still at least 4 riders. I think at least one of them has worked on the front and might not be in that group anymore, but there's still other riders in the group who might benefit from him being out front here. So I think he just has to keep going and try his best. Maybe a group will come across to him, or maybe his teammates will benefit from him being out front because they don't have to do any of the chasing. But yeah, if that gap is correct, 1 minute and 10 seconds, I think this breakaway is looking better and better for the win.
Yep, it's looking very good indeed as they head up this little climb, making it look very easy. It's only about 4 or 5%, but they are romping up this climb at a right rate of knots. There is the composition again of the break, just over 10 kilometres to go now. This has been the break of the day. They've lost 1 rider, and that was Dean Harvey of Ireland. He was dropped from the move with about 25-30 Ks to go. But the break is from Denmark, Anders Foldegger. Also there from Italy, Giacomo Via. Pierre Thierry, a local lad from France, from this particular region. Loic Bettendorf is there from Luxembourg, and rounding out the group of 5 in front from Poland is Mikhail Podmorski. And there it is, 1 minute and 15 seconds, and a little group now coming across to Max Walker here.
Yeah, we're seeing some moves again from the peloton. It looks like it might be a Belgian rider on the front, Dutch rider in second wheel as well. So these are the big nations again. Looks like this is probably Thibaut Delgoso for the Netherlands. Can't quite see the other riders because it's well, the camera's a bit too far away, which is a good sign. I think this is Alex Eghart actually for Belgium with the helmet. I've seen that before. Not sure who the other riders are, but they are pulling a group clear. It's not a huge gap though yet.
Certainly, there's definitely a rider from the United States of America just sat in the slipstream as well. So the most combative rider that will be popular on the podium today in La Gassie is Pierre Thierry. So most combative rider is going to be the Frenchman, but there's under 10 Ks to go now, and these little flurry of counter-attacks. Alexia Sigart is wearing number 1. Of course, it was Sian Utebrooks who took the win last year. Now plying his trade, of course, with Bora Hansgrohe. But 9.5 Ks to go. Next time through the finish, they will get the bell. And it is looking increasingly likely that this group stays away. They clearly appear to me, Jens, to have the legs. It's just if they start to cat and mouse and finesse a little bit now, that's, I think, the only way that they could actually lose this lead. They start to look at each other. They do need to ride as a unit for as long as they can, I think.
Yeah, the legs weren't really moving there just over the top of the climb. Either that's fatigue, or it might just be that they're thinking they have a chance to win this race and they don't want to do too much work. But of course, it's a double-edged sword. Either you do too little work and you get caught, or you've got the best legs left for the finish. It's an attack by the American rider here, but I don't think anyone's pulling clear at the moment. It's the attacking is definitely bringing down the gap. We're seeing 40 seconds, but we know that the time gap is not updated too often, so it might be even less than that. But the gap certainly coming down. The question is if it's coming down enough, or if the peloton might just be too late.
Oh, this is very exciting racing. We expected unpredictable racing in the Tour de l'Avenir, and already on stage one, looked like it was going to be one for the sprinters. With 8.5 Ks to go, it still might be, because the leaders out in front only have a lead of around 40 seconds. We're going to pass through and get the bell very shortly. That will give us a bang-on, up-to-date gap for these riders as they pass through the feed zone. No more feeding allowed, although there's a little bit of a couple of Soigneurs bravely holding out some bidons as they came in to the finish line. This is the bell. Pierre Thierry of France is in the move. Loic Bettendorf of Luxembourg. Mikkel Pomorski of Poland. It is the Dane on the front now, Anders Foldager. And it is Villa just at the back of that group in the blue of Italy. That is the 5 riders out in front. And the clock now continues to tick, Jens. What are we going to see? Here is this, and I think the gap is going to be still around 40 or 50 seconds, I would imagine, because he's got the whole of the finishing straight to ride, but there is the peloton behind him.
Yeah, so Max Walker was out front. He's caught now, and it looks like one of the American riders has taken his place solo out front of the peloton. But you know, is it going to be enough to come back to that group on your own? I don't think that's going to happen. So it's going to have to be a chase from the peloton. They are chasing, but 40 seconds still, slightly more even for the peloton. It's a huge gap to overcome in just 7 kilometers.
Yeah, pretty much. I think it's fair to say zero colour blocking. No real organisation. It's just riders trying to pull themselves clear to salvage something from this stage. And there is still a chance that this break could come back, but it doesn't look like it's going to be because of any real concerted organisation behind. I think it's just the pure desire of winning a stage of the Tour de l'Avenir, and I think that's something that we can talk a little bit more about tomorrow, is the fact that although there's organisation within these teams, these are the riders of the future. Jens, they are here to prove themselves, aren't they? Many have already proven a point and have long-term contracts with some of the biggest teams in the world, as the American rider is just about to be caught by the looks of things. But you do get the sense sometimes when the racing is like this, it's almost every man for themselves, isn't it? Within the team, it's like, okay, we'll just take our chances.
Well, that's certainly how they seem to be riding at the moment. There's zero organisation in the peloton. It's just riders attacking over the top of each other. No organisation at all, and that's not the way to close this gap down, but that's sometimes how U23 racing works. No control, just racing, full gas.
I do like a bit of full gas racing. It's breathless stuff, it really is. Still don't know how this one is going to unfurl. Unfortunately, haven't managed to identify the rider in front. It's not Luke Lamperty. He's already been off the front. It's not the slight climbing figure of Matteo Riticello, and it's certainly not Colby Simmons either. It's either McDonald, Lopez or Schmidt. As our 5 riders out in front continue to relay. Frenchman looks round, drops in to the back wheel. Let's see if we can identify who this rider is. If we get a nice side-on shot of him, that would be very helpful.
Well, just based on the bike and the helmet, I think it's probably a rider from the Hagens-Berman Axion team, and that's just one rider, which is Artem Schmidt. The other riders on different bikes, so it must sort of be him. I can't imagine it's someone else.
Good knowledge there, thank you very much indeed. So it looks like it is indeed Schmidt. There's the bunch behind, 40 seconds at its end, but 5.4 Ks to go. He's got a gap, looks to be only around 10 seconds on the peloton behind. But out in front, they're flying down the backside of this circuit here. The 5 in front, Pierre Thierry, looking round on the back there, slots onto the wheel of Foldager of Denmark. And also just moving through to the back here. It's the rider who's going to end up in the jersey for King of the Mountains, representing Luxembourg. It's been a good day out for Loic Bettendorf, that is for sure. Schmidt now gets into that aero tuck. It does appear to be a little bit more organisation behind, but I fear, Jens, that they have left it too late. I just think there's too much road to make up, and the group out in front, clearly they're going to be hurting, but they seem to have that little bit of momentum, although we've got that little climb to come, and that's where they've been losing a little bit of time. That's where it appears they've lost most time each up this circuit each time.
Yeah, we're going to have to see whether they can bring the gap back as much as possible on the climb, but I don't think even 10 seconds might be too much to bring back on that descent, because it's really fast downhill, and then it's just about 700 or 800 meters left after the descent ends. So this is the breakaway starting that final climb. It's not steep, it's not that long, but it might just be enough for someone to use as a launch pad towards this group from inside the peloton. That's maybe the chance, or someone's going to have to really commit to chasing this down for a sprinter.
They certainly are. Well, this group looking good. It looks as if Schmidt now is going to be taken back by the peloton. Looks to be a little bit more organisation behind, but I fear that they have left it too late. 3.8 Ks to go for the 5 riders in front. This is the opening stage of the Tour de l'Avenir, the Tour of the Future. We started earlier on today in Carnac, and we are now in the small town of La Gissy in the region of Morbihan. The 59th edition of this wonderful race, giving us a glimpse of the stars of the future, many of them stars already in their own right. And we have 5 stars out in front. Pierre Thierry is the man sat in second wheel at the moment, the local lad from this particular region. Loic Bettendorf of Luxembourg is also there. We've got the Polish rider Michał Pomorski. What can he do today? Giacomo Villa is there for Italy. And then rounding out the group from Denmark, Anders Foldager, an exceptionally gifted rider, good on Zwift as well. We've seen him ride esports particularly well. Foldager as well, he's got a real kick on him. And there's an attack on the right-hand side from the group. 3.2 kilometers to go, and there's a big move on the right-hand side, and it looks like it's the man from Luxembourg who's gone.
Yeah, it's a really big move. The British team seem to be chasing in the peloton, but it might be too late if the group out front is moving this hard. No real separation, though, in that front group.
No, it didn't manage to split them. It's a fast climb. The rider struggling at the back was Michał Pomorski, but I think he's managed to latch on to the wheel in front. 2.8 Ks to go. It is indeed a Great Britain now riding hard on the front to try and bring this gap down, perhaps to open things up for Max Walker or Rob Donaldson. And it's back together. There's a little bit of hesitation here as they pause and take a breath. Foldager moves through to the front. They've stripped out the time gap here. I think it definitely has gone down a little bit, probably around 20 or 30 seconds. Apologies for the lack of time back gap. And what that does do is just add that little bit more intrigue, a little bit more tension to proceedings here. This is a nail-biter.
Yeah, I think the time gap, I've just tried to time it just around this corner. We're not going to see it completely, but I think it's about 22, 23 seconds. So it could still come down. They're not really cooperating here. Their pace has dropped right down, and the pace in the peloton has gone up even more with one of the Swiss riders attacking. I think they're going to definitely come very close. The question is, are they going to get there, or are they just going to miss out?
Yep, 25 seconds it's saying, and they're closing now. It looks like Germany are getting involved as well in the chase. They're one of the teams, along with Switzerland, who are doing the chasing earlier on. I certainly think the gap, as you alluded to, Jens, is less now than 25 seconds, 2 kilometers to go, and there's another big attack on the left-hand side. There's also a move here from the Italian, it's Villa, who has gone pursued straight away by Pierre Thierry of France. Latching on to the Frenchman wheel is Foldager of Denmark. Just behind then in the red and white is Pomorski, and the last man on the back, who's been pretty quick taking the points at the intermediate sprint and the King of the Mountains, is Bettendorf of Luxembourg. Here is the bunch behind. Still, they are moving quickly, but they have not managed to eat too much into the lead of the riders out in front as they almost head now into the finishing straight, Jens.
Yeah, less than 20 seconds on the road, I think, but it could all be too late with just over a kilometer to go. These are the final corners. There's just one more left-hand turn, I think, left before the finish line. Just timed it in this corner, 14 seconds, so they really have to keep going. They can't do this. They can't really stall at the moment. This is the final turn. Bettendorf trying to make a move into the finish straight. He wants the top 5, but someone's going to have to keep this pace high, or the group's going to come back with the pace being on here.
Now the pace they carried, there's only about 10 seconds in it now. This could come back together. There's a rider that's just jumped off the front at the moment. This is absolutely fascinating stuff. Let's get back to the front of the race. Are they still riding together now? They're just going to come through to the finishing straight now. Opens up in front of them. What a wonderful shot here. There is the group on the left-hand side. And only 50, 60 metres behind is the peloton. What a thrilling opening stage of the Tour de l'Avenir. There's a possibility they could get caught, but I think this is the sprint. They are going to stay away. It looks like it's Voldegger in the centre. Vila on the right-hand side, but it's Voldegger who takes the win for Denmark. The bunch behind only a handful of seconds. But what a win it was in the end. A win for Denmark on the opening stage of the Tour de l'Avenir here in La Giccie. That was an absolute thriller.
Yeah, breakaway win on the first day of the Tour de l'Avenir, and this is what we like to see. Full gas racing from these under-23s. Voldegger with the best sprint from that small group. We sort of expected it. You named him as your favorite, I think, from that group, and rightly so. He was the fastest rider there. Just holding on to that lead in the final lap. It was a pretty incredible finish there.
That was a super finish. He also won a stage of the Giro Next Gen this year. One of the other big stage races for the under-23s. No doubt about the winner there, but I tell you what, they left it very, very late. But in the end, they held off the peloton by, it must have only been 4 or 5 seconds. It looks like Bettendorf as well did stay clear to claim 5th place, only a second or two in front of the bunch. But that was, well, breathless stuff. Truly exciting racing here for the opening stage of the Tour de l'Avenir, and I think that augurs well for the next 7 days of racing, Jens.
Yeah, definitely. This is exactly what you can expect from the Tour de l'Avenir. It's the same every year. Lots of attacks, pretty chaotic racing, and yeah, I think we're seeing a lot of riders dropped coming in. So we'll have to see later in the results whether there's any GC favourites who haven't made it across the line in the peloton. Saw some gaps there as well, so it'll be interesting. There is a rule that the gaps in the peloton have to be 3 seconds before they're counted, so we might see everyone in the same time, actually. But I do think that first group is going to gain a couple seconds, and with no bonification seconds, that means that group might hold on to the jersey at least after tomorrow. But here we see the sprint, and it's Voldegger. Yeah, Voldegger. Well, we didn't see most of the sprint. I think it was Pierre Thierry who led it out there, and Voldegger just timed it to perfection. Vila not enough to come over the top of him, and yeah, it was just the strongest sprinter in that group.
Well, that's the 4th win this year for the man from Denmark. 22 years of age, took the Memorial Poyesi earlier in the year. That was in March. Went on to win the Trophy San Vendemiano, and then stage 8 of the Tour, or the Giro Next Gen, the Baby Giro as it's now known, and now has taken the opening stage of the Tour de l'Avenir. And those sorts of results, you would imagine, would set things up nicely for Voldegger for a potential step up in 2024. Currently rides for the Biesi Carrera UCI Continental team, and that set of results there, especially the Giro stage win and winning here, suggests this man will be riding, you'd imagine, at least at pro team level next year.
Yeah, Jaco Alula, I've already picked him up for next year, so
there you go.
That's what we expect from the stage winners in the Tour de l'Avenir. The scouting from these pro teams is good enough to pick those riders up before they hit big in Tour de l'Avenir.
My Danish, not that good. Unfortunately, I can't translate what was happening there, but no, perfectly timed sprint by a man of real capacity. And he'll be wearing the leader's jersey. As we were just talking about, no time bonuses on offer anywhere, none at the finish. and none out on the road. But there's so much opportunity to take time in this race. I think that is it's quite a good move. Team time trial on stage 3. We'll see the first of the big time gaps. Then we have the individual time trial and some really punchy mountain stages at the back end of this race. But a good opening stage. And we have the first yellow jersey of this race. And the man who takes second place will wear the green jersey. This man, of course, will take the green and the yellow jersey, but it'll be the Italian who took second place, Vila, who will be in the green jersey at the start of tomorrow's stage. Well, that was entertaining stuff. Takeaways from you, Jens, from today's opening stage?
Yeah, just that everyone who's watched today should watch the next couple stages, because it's going to be just as exciting. I think, yeah, we see just the same manner of not enough control as we see the top 10 coming through here.
Anders Foldega of Denmark confirmed as the winner, Giacomo Villa of Italy and France, and it was a local man, Pierre Thierry, who took third place, as well as the most combative rider, the plus combatif, as the French say. And there is that finish again. Didn't quite see the whole sprint unfurled. Fourth place for Pomorski, just crossing the line in fifth there. Quite catch, who was in sixth. We get confirmation of that. We can linger on that top 10 result for just a little bit longer. That would be very helpful. But this is the man who'll be visiting the podium very shortly. So I hope you enjoyed the opening day's racing. There is the confirmation of the general classification. Foldega leads from Villa, Pierre Thierry, Pomorski, Bettendorf. That was your top 5 on the stage. Then it was the Israel rider, Roten Tenne, who was 6th. Then Edvardsen Fredheim from Norway, Riley Pickerel of Canada, Vlad van Mechelen of Belgium in 9th, and then Francesco Bussato of Italy, rounding out your top 10. So the top 10 on the stage, mirroring the general classification as we head into stage 2. Shortly, we shall be heading to the podium, but that was a real good indication, as Jens said, of what is to come over the next few stages. Looking ahead to tomorrow's stage, looking at the profile right now, it is a longer one. It's the longest of the race, in fact. We start in Nozay and we head to Chinon, over 189 kilometers. One King of the Mountains that comes at about halfway. That's only a 4th category climb. So it should mean, depending on the score, the amount of points he's got, that Bettendorf holds on to his King of the Mountains jersey. There's a sprint just after half distance, and then we have a flat finish. But from what we've seen today, although it looks like a sprint stage on paper, this chaotic nature of the racing, there's a certain level of coordination, but it's certainly not what we're used to in pro racing. Like any stage could be a stage for the breakaway. Let's be plain about that.
Yeah, I think if there's any stage in this Tour de l'Avenir that could be a sprint, it's tomorrow's stage. But we did see today that there was not enough control to bring it to a sprint in this stage, which was also perfectly suited to a sprint finish. So there's every chance that a breakaway could make it to the finish tomorrow. And I think if I were in the team car of one of the teams without a top sprinter, I would be saying, you know, this is a great sign. The teams aren't controlling it, so we'll just put someone strong in the breakaway and we'll try to win it from there. Yeah,
there'll be teams, as you say, with protected riders for the GC, some sprinters, but it's also about taking chances as well. You can go into the race with a plan, but there also needs to be a plan B and a plan C. And then after that, it's just bike racing. It's just that innate ability, or the innate ability which is constantly finessed as the years pass. These young riders just learning their trade on the bikes. But it is wonderful that we're going to see this, the entirety of the Tour de l'Avenir for the very first time. See how these riders progress as they ride through France, from the northeast, from the northwest, should I say, down into the southeast, from the Morbihan region to the Savoie, heading deep into the mountains. Along the way, we've got some real stages for the punchers, an opportunity for the sprinters tomorrow. But based on what we've seen, that's by no means a cert. And we have a team time trial on stage 3 as well. That is pretty flat. That's a 21k team time trial from Issoudun to Vatin. Then we head to Evieux-les-Bains on stage 4 as we look at highlights of the opening stage of this year's Tour de l'Avenir. They rolled out earlier today in beautiful sunny conditions on the coast in Brittany in Carnac. A couple of early riders tried to make an impression, but eventually we had 6 riders that formed the breakaway of the day, which ultimately, save for one rider, was to hold on only just to the finish. Dean Harvey, the man from Ireland there, Anders Foldega of Denmark, Giacomo Villa of Italy, Pierre Thierry of France, Loic Bettendorf of Luxembourg, and Mikhail Pomorski of Poland. Meanwhile, the chase behind was primarily led by the German squad and by Switzerland. Took down the best part of 2 minutes, despite this group working exceptionally well as a unit. There were 2 classified mountains along the way. The most points totted up at the end of the day went to the man from Luxembourg, so he'll end up in the jersey for King of the Mountains. And there was the illustration of that big turn of speed, a huge gear over the final categorised climb of the day. That was the Côte de Saint-Gongarde. So fast, in fact, they disappeared from view, and we didn't actually see exactly when they crossed the line, but I can assure you it was the man from Luxembourg who took maximum points. Sensibly, the 2 that almost took off up the road waited, and again they gelled as a complete unit to form a pretty formidable fighting force. Unfortunately for the Irish squad, Dean Harvey couldn't hold on to the ferocious pace being set at the front. He was rejoined by the peloton, and up in front the 5 riders kept working together as a collective fighting force, chipping away at this rolling finishing circuit in the beautiful town of La Guisilly. Behind, the bunch was fragmenting, no real organised chase. There was an interesting counter-attack that came at one point from Luc Lamperty and Max Walker. That was ultimately to come to nothing. Lamperty thinking better of it and dropping back to the clutches of the peloton. Walker himself was then caught by another counter-attack containing 5 or 6 riders, including America, the Netherlands and Belgium. But coming in to the final lap, our leading 5 riders still held on to a lead between 40 and 30 seconds. And in the end, it was Anders Foldega who took win number 4 with a perfectly timed and powerful sprint to take the win, and in the process take the overall lead of the Tour de l'Avenir. So that was the summary of the day, and here we're going to have a chat with our race winner.
Yeah, it was incredible. Very hard stage. We tried to play the game with the peloton, and in the end we came out with the win.
Victory and the best jersey, yellow jersey today.
Yeah, it's pretty nice. I've never been in a leader's jersey before, so it will be nice.
Thanks. Thanks, Anders. Et on va repasser en français puisqu'on va avoir Pierre Thierry à nos côtés.
A short but sweet interview there with our stage winner Anders Foldega. And as you were mentioning, moving on to pastures new next year, no real surprise. The squad for the next 2 seasons, taking through to 2025, will be Team Jayco Alula, as we get confirmation of the general classification. All of these riders on the same time at the moment. Good ride there by Rutem Teni of the Israel squad to take 6th, best of the rest. Just ahead of Edvardsen, Fredheim, Pickrell, Van Mechten and Bussato. So please do stay with us. In fact, stay with us for the rest of the week. Back on at the same time tomorrow. There's a couple of different, so look, just double check the timings. There's a couple of different stage timings as we head throughout the week. And here we've got an interview with the first Frenchman on the day.
Ou satisfait d'avoir été toute la journée devant?
Are you happy with today? You spent the whole day in front?
Bon après, j'avais loupé l'échappée, on avait eu une 30 de retard. J'ai quand même réussi à rentrer. Donc ouais, je suis quand même satisfait de ma journée. Et, bon, quand
I'm happy with my
quand
day.
j'ai lancé mon sprint, j'avais pris un petit trou, mais ils étaient plus forts, j'ai galéré un peu.
I think the
vous
strongest
êtes
rider
mené
won. I
sur
didn't quite get the sprint right.
Ça peut être intéressant avec notamment le chrono par équipe dans 48 heures.
Ah oui, carrément, par équipe,
We've
donc,
got
vraiment,
just over a day's
beaucoup de choses,
time.
mais,
What do you think your chances
mais bon,
in
là,
the team time trial?
Là, je vais savourer. J'ai passé toute la journée à côté sur mes terres, tout le monde m'encourageait, c'était vraiment des frissons toute la journée. Et ouais, je suis super content et je remercie le public.
Et dernière chance, parlez-nous de ce circuit final à la Galicie, c'était un grand moment. Hein.
C'était
A big
grand
moment on the
une
finishing
belle
circuit.
course.
Nearly
Dans
at
le
home.
circuit, et je
He
savais
said,
que
yeah, it was
avec, 2 minutes sur le circuit, c'était bon parce qu'il y a tellement de vire et
It's a great circuit.
c'est dur à contrôler. On a quand même eu chaud aux fesses à la fin, mais ouais, je suis satisfait de la 3e place.
Voilà, merci à Pierre Thierry.
Still pretty
qui est
happy.
à nos côtés.
With the 3rd place on the day. Always nice riding on home soil. And that was Pierre Thierry. Get his name the right way around. Young man from this region, as I said before, rides for the Morbihan team. So certainly had the benefit of a little bit of local knowledge, perhaps, on what was an interesting finishing circuit. Had the feel of a Kermesse. I must admit, Jens, I don't know about you, I'm a big fan of finishing circuits. I must admit, give me a nice finishing circuit any day.
I'm a big fan of racing, and I think this sort of finishing circuit it has given us good racing. So I'm all for it.
Well, we're not going to head to the podium, but we will see you tomorrow. Join us for stage 2 of what is already a thrilling race. But for now, from me, Matt Stevens, and from Jens Dekker, it's goodbye, and we'll see you tomorrow.